Hi everyone, this is Nick Palmer from Group IB. Thanks for joining today's webinar. I'm just going to give everyone probably 2 or 3 minutes to continue joining. We have a large number of attendees on the line, and actually we're still waiting for our CTO to join us for the webinar, Dimitri. So I'll just give everyone 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll get started here. All right, everyone. So we'll get started on today's webinar. I think Dimitri's just running out of another meeting, and he should join us very shortly. So thank you, everyone, again for taking the time out of your day to join us for today's webinar, Group IB webinar on high-tech crime trends. Really, this webinar is designed to give an overview of all of the things that we've monitored during this reporting period, but also make some predictions on what we expect to see in the coming period. It's been a very active year, and we certainly expect a lot to come in the year to come. So it's always nice to take a moment and make some predictions on that. So that's exactly what we'll do today. Focus on some of the key findings from Group IB's report throughout this year. Also, focus on some predictions and forecasts for items and incidents to come in the period this year, and also have an opportunity for some question and answer. So myself, Nicholas Palmer, I'm responsible for key customer accounts at Group IB, and joining me very shortly will be Dimitri Volkov, who is Group IB's CTO and also the head of our threat intelligence team. He wears many hats at Group IB, and actually Dima's just joining me here in the room today, so we're just getting underway. All right, so I see a lot of new faces on the line. You know, some of our existing customers, but certainly some new partners and new, hopefully, potential people interested in some of the intelligence that Group IB has. So I'll just give a quick introduction to who Group IB is, if you don't know. So we are a threat intelligence vendor and company providing threat intelligence mainly about Russian-speaking cybercrime. That's where our expertise lies. We've been operating for 14 years. Actually, and do a lot of work with Europol and Interpol to provide our knowledge about Russian-speaking cybercrime as it relates to some of their members that they have to police around the world. So that's a little bit about our company, and without further ado, let's get into a little bit about the webinar. And what we're going to focus on first is some of the key findings from targeted attack methodology, and we'll focus specifically first on some of the state-sponsored motivations that we see from these particular state-sponsored groups, and some of the motivations that are more traditional, and we'll get into some of the newer ones in a little bit more detail later on. But traditional motivations that we've seen are corporate espionage and espionage against organizations. We see this from, you know, Equation Group carrying out attacks on the SWIFT Services Bureau to monitor different SWIFT transactions in some of the Middle Eastern countries. Naturally, looking at Lazarus attacks, you know, conducting watering hole attacks against a number of Polish financial institutions by compromising one of the banking regulator pages earlier on in the year, and also impacting some of the banks in the Latin American market. You know, a lot of these, especially looking at the different attack toolkits from the Lazarus group, were designed for espionage purposes. You know, watching, seeing what VIP clients are doing, what organizations are doing, and not necessarily having the goal of financial theft. You know, looking at some of the financial theft motivators, we've obviously seen big incidents affecting Bangladesh Bank in February of 2016 and other incidents. But these are some of the more traditional motivations that we've seen. And throughout this year, we've seen some of the motivations changed from a state-sponsored event. You know, looking at the espionage events, monitoring VIP clients, monitoring top management, or using that attack to get to access to other banks are some of the more traditional motivators from an espionage standpoint. Looking now to some of the things that we're seeing are more in the destruction realm. And three of the key, you know, motivators from a destruction realm to actually disrupt the infrastructure and take the bank offline, or actually cause influences to some of the market trade values, you know, making illicit trades in different trading platforms and causing fluctuation in the trading currency. Looking at some of the events from Corco, you know, it certainly is possible. Two of the screenshots here on the bottom of the page are actually reports that Group IB's done recently on some of the targeted attacks that we've attributed to Black Energy. Earlier on in 2016, we see the Black Energy Group starting to use different crypto locker events in their targeted attacks to actually disrupt some of these banks during the targeted attack incidents. Additionally, in some of the attacks against Japanese banks, we saw Omni ransomware used to also disrupt some of the different operations within the financial institutions, and really pointing to a motivation change into the destruction realm and disrupting the infrastructure and operations of the bank rather than just conducting espionage tactics. You know, focusing on sabotage a little bit further, it's important to consider some of the events, not only from the state-sponsored actors that I just mentioned on the previous page. Here's one of the Black energy incidents that we saw in March that I mentioned on the previous page, but also really widely known events with WannaCry and NotPetya. I mean, looking at the tools and disruption that these events caused by the Lazarus group, it was clear from the tools that were developed that some of the motivations with that was into sabotage rather than financial theft. We've seen sabotage used by financially motivated hackers like the Cobalt Group, implementing tools like PitaRap, for example, to cover their tracks, but also to disrupt the operations. In incident response that we've conducted in events surrounding Cobalt Group, they've used tools now that have been able to cause a disruption in the financial institution and actually take banks offline for a number of days. So it's important to focus on these attack trends. Let's move on now a little bit from some of the state-sponsored motivations to the more financially motivations when it comes to a targeted attack methodology. Naturally, I think, covering the headlines connected to SWIFT organization, there's been widespread attacks and knowledge connected to this, but it's important to think about some of the other motivations when it comes to a financially motivated targeted attack. Group IB, if you've read our reports covering the Cobalt Group, have really focused on conducting targeted attacks on ATM systems all throughout 2016 and continuing into this year, although they've made a shift into card processing systems. Targeting ATMs, we really see, like I just mentioned, Cobalt shifting focus to other things like card processing as one of the main disadvantages of this particular attack target is the cash out process and the risk to the money mules. We've seen a number of different mules arrested in targeted attacks involving ATM systems, and that's why we've seen a focus and shift towards card processing events that we've seen earlier on this year from Cobalt and others. The technique was first tried in the US and former CIS countries. Actually, in Kazakhstan, we did an incident response connected to card processing. And why is this? Really, we feel that there's been a lot of focus and protection enhancements from SWIFT organizations, but card processing systems are really not as well protected as the SWIFT systems within financial institutions. That's one. The second is that there's really no need for complex money laundering schemes as would be connected to large amounts of transfers being conducted when targeting the SWIFT networks. So definitely in the future we're going to predict that there's going to be more focus into card processing style of targeted attacks, and we've already seen some incidents of this this year. So if you're interested in learning more about that, we can tell you more in an offline setting. I think this is the next slide is a little bit of a well-known trend at this point from a targeted attack methodology, but I think important to mention as well, and that's that targeted attacks are now becoming fileless in the malicious programs that are being used to conduct these targeted attacks. These attacks are now scripts, and they're certainly the most populated method of targeted attack, and they're allowing attackers to be flexible in their attack methodology. They can make modifications to the scripts involved if they need to during a targeted attack. Some of the other advantages, of course, is these fileless attacks only existing in memory are not easily detected by traditional antivirus softwares. They certainly have complicated investigations for our forensics responders, and they make conducting incident response relatively challenging. So that's certainly something that we continue to expect to see during targeted attacks. One of the other key findings that we had throughout this year was our connection of Cobalt events to the original events that happened in Taiwan. If you remember way back, some of the first incidents in targeted attacks that occurred with the ultimate goal of jackpotting ATM systems were to target the ATM systems, and this was in Taiwan, of course. We saw widespread attacks across Russia from the Cobalt Group in 2016, but also attacks in Europe that we were lucky enough to conduct incident response on. We, of course, have hunting rules at Group IB and various repositories, and we were lucky enough to have a hit on our hunting rules to have an opportunity to analyze the case that happened in Taiwan versus the case that happened in Europe. And we were actually able to attribute Cobalt's activities to the Taiwan events that occurred, identifying identical codes that were used to record dispense results into unencrypted files. They also had very simple protection mechanisms, only launching different month checks in their attacks, and they had identical error messages for different dispense results. So that was a very interesting case for us as well. Some of the other key findings that we had throughout this year is we've seen a lot of change in tactics. Looking at some of the targeted attacks that have occurred, we've really seen tools being used by other, let's say, non-state sponsored groups that are conducting targeted attacks, but really using their tools and their different tactics. We've seen a number of different cases this year that involved penetration of different IT integration companies, financial services companies that support the customers that are of interest for these targeted attack groups. So we see a lot of techniques to use and attack different third-party integrators and use their mail systems to send their spear phishing emails and payloads, etc. We've seen attacks against personal emails instead of corporate emails, and really a lot of tools and tactics that are used by state-sponsored groups being adopted by non-state sponsored groups to conduct their targeted attacks. We've seen, like we talked about on previous slides, less attention to SWIFT networks. We mentioned some of the different positive and negative scenarios when targeting SWIFT, and we certainly believe that there'll be new targets towards card processing. They're less protected than SWIFT. They don't require complex money laundering schemes, and they're very easy to conduct attacks in other countries when conducting the cash out process. We talked a little bit on the previous slide, so we'll skip over fileless malware, but we continue to see targeted attack groups using convert channels like HTTPS and DNS protocols to communicate within the internal network when conducting their incident response. And we will certainly see more of safety for mules and cash out process, and that's why we believe that card processing will be one of the main focuses throughout this year. So forecast, what do we think will happen from a targeted attacks perspective? More activity from state-sponsored groups, but having the motivation of sabotage. We believe that it will be one of the most dangerous motivations from different targeted attack groups, especially state-sponsored, to occur to different organizations. We've already heard requests from a number of our clients that this is a concern from them, and we see, sorry about that, and we see that this will be a main motivator for future targeted attacks to come. Focus on card processing, I think we talked a little bit about this already. New vectors, looking at different third parties that you work with that may have ability to impact your corporate network. This is something that I think should be paid strictly attention to, considering the events that we've seen from third-party attacks from financial services, software companies, and different integrators to receive spear phishing emails to different organizations of interest for targeted attack groups. New players, new financially motivated hackers entering the scene. We believe this to happen. We'll talk a little bit about different groups that have left the market and new groups that are entering the market. And so we certainly expect new players to enter the market. New region, we've already seen different regions like the Middle East and Latin America, especially in recent news, become certain areas of interest from targeted attack groups. As they look to new and simple ways to conduct cash out process and protect themselves. They're looking for the path of least resistance, and with some recent news events and targets from different targeted attack groups, we see Latin America and the Middle East, which may be a little bit less protected than traditional markets like the US and Europe from an information security perspective. So that's what we see from a targeted attacks point of view. Maybe I'll stop there. Do you have anything to add at this point?
Well, if we speak about priority, I would say in the past the most specific threat for the banking industry was financial motivated hackers. Now the situation changed completely. The main threat for any bank in any region now is the state-sponsored attackers, because we potentially bring more damage to any bank. We're focusing from espionage to sabotage, as Nick already mentioned, and that's why in every region will be their own potential threat actor, but it should be a state-sponsored threat actor. What we see now, we see that Lazarus Group is pretty active on financial sector. We see that Black Energy is also really active. We wait or expect, I would say, that Chinese threat actors also raise their attention for financial vectors, financial sectors in different countries, and probably some Latin American threat actors also will pay more attention to this sector, and in the next year we'll see more attacks against banks, payment systems, and probably help me please, card processing and stock exchange companies.
Thanks for that addition, Dima. So the next trend that we reported on in our annual report were different scripted attacks. I mean, looking at some of the events like NotPetya, they had three different steps in their attack methodology: launching Mimikatz, using publicly available tools to propagate within the existing, legitimate tools within the to propagate within the existing network, and they used very well known and very well documented exploits that were released, like Eternal Blue. So what have we seen already? We've seen some of the banking Trojans, some of the different ransomware events that have happened after that, already adopting these three simple steps. You know, using already known exploits. So it's important to focus on some of these additions to already existing tools with this simple attack methodology that they're using in some of these more scripted patterns of attack. So what were the other key findings during Group IB's report? I think cryptocurrency has been a very interesting phenomenon in the last number of years, but also too from a cybersecurity perspective. You know, you look at the number of events that have occurred and have impacted the SWIFT networks, for example, and then you take a look and you start to look at what has impacted the cryptocurrency market and the crypto exchange market. Look at all of the events that have happened in the previous year, and especially the financial value that have happened to these different events. And we certainly believe that cryptocurrency services and these types of incidents will become more prolific in the future as they provide a higher return on investments for cyber criminals to conduct. We already see different banking Trojans refocusing their configuration files and capabilities to target the users of cryptocurrency services. We see them already listed in the config files of TrickBot before the arrest of Votrak owner in KDARS and Triba and other different PC and Android banking Trojans already elementing. One of the most simple campaigns is phishing, actually, to target different users of cryptocurrency services, and steal their information. We've actually developed an additional service throughout this year to help protect the cryptocurrency organizations and ICOs from these styles of attacks using our CERT team, and we actively see numerous phishing websites created to target users of cryptocurrency services. Targeted attacks on cryptocurrency exchanges are carried out by financially motivated hackers, but also state-sponsored hackers, and we've seen this actively throughout this year already. So forecast for cryptocurrency servers, certainly seeing good news for banks. I think it's a little bit funny, but in a way to look at it seriously, cyber criminals are really focused on getting the maximum return on their investment, and they see that in cryptocurrency exchanges, conducting targeted attacks on these crypto exchanges. As we've seen in the previous slide, it can be very profitable for them to do so. Impact on exchange rates. If the cybercriminal groups that are going to conduct targeted attacks on these crypto exchanges and cryptocurrencies, if they know that ahead of time, they can bet against the market and cause quite large disruption in the exchange rate of these different cryptocurrencies. So the opportunity for that will be very heavy. Continue to focus on phishing events targeting different users of cryptocurrency, but also enabling different Android Trojans to attack users of cryptocurrency is some of the things that we expect to see in this reporting period. So let's shift focus a little bit to PC Trojans and some of the key findings around that. In Russia, interestingly, and as we kind of expected, almost all PC Trojans have left the Russian market and targeting customers here in Russia. We see Android Trojans being developed widely, and some new banking Trojans introducing different web fakes to target customers around the globe. Interesting to note that out of 22 of the malicious programs that are designed to steal funds from different clients of institutions, 91% of them are actually controlled by Russian-speaking actors. So this gives us, as Group IB, being a Russian organization, really good visibility to some of the impacts that it has had on different customers that are located outside of Russia. Turning attention to Android Trojans, we see a lot of different web fakes developed to target customers not located in Russia, in Western countries like Europe and the United States. Dual-factor authentication continues to be defeated by many of these Trojans. We've seen different card-to-card transfer methodologies being defeated by different Android Trojans used by different threat actors. And one of the most interesting things that we've seen developed by Android Trojans is actually defeating different Apple Pay security mechanisms. So using traditional methodology with different Android Trojans to defeat dual-factor authentication like SMS authentication, they've been able to infect an Android device to collect information about the account, to use their credit card and try to set up Apple Pay on their own mobile device. And then when Apple Pay sends an SMS notification to authenticate that specific device, using traditional capabilities within these Android Trojans to intercept that notification and then go ahead and make purchases at will. So we've seen that attack methodology against Apple Pay being used here locally in Russia, and can certainly expect to see that in other countries as well. Turning attention towards some of the key findings around phishing, we detected about 1.5 million unique phishing links in 2016 on 657 different domains. And if you don't know, we also collect in an automated fashion some of the phishing kits that are used to create these phishing web pages, but also unique information within them, such as the drop email accounts. So where the actual credentials are being sent from different phishing campaigns targeting customers around the world. And this kind of provides a breakdown of how many and what percentage we see of different email providers being used in different drop email accounts. So you can see the majority is used to target Gmail, followed by Yahoo and Yandex. Looking at different categories, targeting different industry, financial services, of course, being the majority, being 31%, followed by trying to get credentials of different webmail services at 24%, and cloud storage services followed shortly thereafter. So forecasts to banking customers. As we see a drop in PC Trojans being used, more simple tactics like phishing for credentials, email credentials, account credentials for different financial services, we certainly expect this to see the losses exceeded from PC Trojans used by different phishing campaigns. The damage from Android Trojans will exceed the loss of PC Trojans, in Russia, most certainly, as we've seen almost all of them leave this market, but also abroad as well. On the previous slide, when we looked at different Android Trojans, you see the web fakes to target different customers around the globe certainly being developed in more extent as well. And PC Trojans will evolve, and by combining attacks from different self-propagation techniques that we talked about on previous slides. So those are some of the forecasts that we expect to see from different financial institution customers. Also, I think it's important to note and important to look at some of the different public breaches that have occurred. You know, looking at the leak of source code to public of Mirai botnet, and then a pickup of different IoT DDoS attacks. Looking at the breach and the release of some of the information connected to the Shadow Brokers release, and now some of the tools being used in different ransomware attacks throughout the events this year. I think it's very important to look at, always analyze, and understand how these release of source code from some of these hacking tools can be used to target your organization. So we certainly see some of these open source code being released to support different cybercriminal operations around the world, and we expect that to continue throughout this year. So those were some of the key features that I wanted to share in today's webinar, and maybe Dima, if you have anything else to add, please feel free. And now we can maybe pause a little bit and take any questions that are on there from the line. So maybe you could ask your question in the chat box, since the microphones are disabled on GoToWebinar.
So, and if you don't mind, I would like to add something about this specific slide about scripted cyber attacks. I would say it's one of the most important potential trend in the nearest future, because it's like a Pandora box that already not paid demonstrated with really successful. So there are many mature organizations were really affected. We have already in place very expensive security solutions. We have good experts on the environment. We monitor security. We consume intelligence. So we're buying legitimate products. We, I would say, do best practices. But with three simple steps, like launching mimic-ads, collecting logins and passwords, using standard standard code execution techniques like using PS exact tools or Windows management instrumentation, allowed threat actors to penetrate from infected companies who were really affected, penetrated to other companies who had just a, I would say, a network connection to the same companies as well. And it was really effective. So self-propagation allows threat actors to develop new tools, like new reconnaissance models, that allows them to live in or combining techniques living just in the memory, distribute themselves in the corporate network, find most interesting machines, like it could be banking machines, it could be POS terminals, it could be CRM systems, whatever. So most critical and most interesting system in the corporate network could be found by malicious code automatically. All we need is just to launch on any computer in the corporate network. It could be just a personal assistant of I know, one of the middle manager, or it could be a trainee that you hired and gave him access in your network environment. If we just infect this one computer, we potentially could affect whole network, find most interesting systems, and collect most interesting information. And how we could potentially use it. So on the first step, we could just use it to find new interesting systems and infect only that system. And I would say create persistence on that system. And that's it. On our case, we potentially could use the same self-propagation methods to be persistent in the network. We don't need to create new services. We don't need to add new scheduled tasks. All we need is to just completely infect all the network environment, live only in the memory, and when even if you reboot all your computers and only one computer will be online, when all other computers will be restarted and get online again, only one infected computer will relaunch this attack, and again all your computer network will be fully compromised. It could potentially raise the effectiveness on banking trojans. I would say this is the only effective way for banking trojans, I mean standard banking trojans, to survive in this competitive environment. Because let's imagine that the threat actor trying to attack corporate network with banking trojans. What happens now? He infects one computer and it doesn't use to work with internet banking. It means that this infected machine will be cleaned very soon, and the threat actor will not take any actions to find any relative neighbor machine in the corporate network that really exists in the corporate environment and used to manage internet banking account. In this case, malicious code will find this computer automatically, will detect it, will persist, provide persistence on that system, and send back all information to a threat actor, and he will conduct attack on that specific machine. This is case number one. Of course, all threat actors who conduct targeted attacks also will use the same techniques. And what is the most, if you take a look on the last slide with open source code, let's imagine a situation when another threat actor will develop a new framework for self-propagation and put it on its open source source code on in public, like on GitHub or any other platform to share code. Doesn't matter. In this case, many threat actors immediately will implement the same code, the same techniques in other tools, and it will really could be the Pandora box that opens huge opportunities to financial motivated and state-sponsored threat actors.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dima, for that that addition. There's a couple questions if the slides will be available online. Certainly, we can supply those to you. So if you just write me a quick email here, we can send you the the slides for you. So there's a couple interesting questions as well. So one of them is just give me 1 second here. I don't remember seeing any reference to So what are your thoughts, Dima, perhaps on threats to critical infrastructure, for example, utilities, power plants, national grids, etc.?
Well, excellent question. We published in our annual report information about black energy history of development. So we started a couple of years ago researching more and more in the energy sector. That's where actually we get our name of black energy. And we can see that first of all, we start to attack in the specific regional energy companies. It was a reconnaissance operation. All we need is just to understand with the tools that we developed, what type of software, what type of hardware used in the specific region by energy sector. When we started to attack manufacturers of this software and vendors, manufacturers of software and hardware that provide the technology to that energy sector. And then we get back to the same energy companies with new capabilities that allows them to manage automatically RTU, remote terminal unit, that allows you to help me
Fluctuate the structure.
I would say open and close the relay on the network grid. And ESET actually did a really good report about in destroyer related to black energy. And the destroyer is a toolkit used by black energy. This is a sort of evolution, and we see that we were really successful. We were successful in post-Soviet Union countries. Now we will, I'm certainly sure that we will start to test the same tools in different sectors, like not just in energy, but oil, gas, and probably water. Because of this success, other threat actors, state-sponsored threat actors, also will try to buy these tools. When they fail to looking for these tools in, I would say, government and communication, will start to develop their own tools. It will take the same about 3 years. We should have to pass all these steps. So we have to again attack first of all energy companies, then the manufacturers, then get back to energy companies again. So, but there should be more, much more attacks from state-sponsored threat actors, and that is also relevant to the prediction that we did about threat actors from state-sponsored threat actors will be the main threat not only for financial sector but for other sectors as well.
Great, thanks very much, Dima. So just if you would like a copy of the report, you could just write me here, or we can do another one as well if you don't want to talk to me. So you can write there, and we'll happily send you a copy of the report. And if there are any other questions, Dimitri and I would be happy to answer them. And we'll certainly stay on the line to answer them. So there's another question here. So thank you for all your questions. And this question relates specifically to policing cybersecurity, and give us kind of the impact and forecast on the way policing of cybercrime is currently organized, and how should policing of cybercrime be organized in the future. I think that's a very broad question, certainly. You know, looking at the way Interpol and Europol have certainly increased their activities in the number of arrests that they've conducted this year. I think these types of organizations have made a real impact in some of the different cybercrime groups that are affecting you know, companies and people around the world. Certainly, I think I know it's kind of stereotypical, but more sharing towards policing, and also back to industry who's contributing to this you know, to this series of events is one of the things that, in my opinion, could improve a little bit. We give a lot in one direction sometimes to our customers, to other organizations, to the policing industry. And this is, I think, and of course we know it's very, very helpful to receive. Then they can draw a broader picture of different cybercriminal groups that are impacting their customers in their communities. But giving a little bit back to the people who are giving to you is, of course, it's a two-way street, and any small piece of information, feedback, etc., that Group IB gets often helps to continue our investigation and make drastic strides in the efforts that can really help the policing community a little bit more. So I think, really focusing on that bi-directional sharing can really be an effective improvement in the future. And maybe it's a biased answer, but I think it's one that could really benefit both sides of the equation, from policing to private organization as well. So the next question is kind of a broad question as well, but the question is, what is kind of the largest threat in telecommunications or to specific ISP providers at the current moment?
Yes, and we should split ISP for private customers and for corporate sector. And for private customers, the threat will be IoT botnets. So it's pretty clear. But in case of corporate networks, we see really interesting trend where threat actors were doing targeted attacks, as Nick already mentioned. We're using trusted partners to using them as an initial vector to penetrate in the corporate networks of banks, payment systems, and other companies as well. And that's why internet providers were always a trusted partner. We always have access to internal network or even to a border network device that is already in the corporate network. Usually we have this access. And threat actors, we potentially, not just potential, we already do it in Russia. We're trying to attack telecommunication company to penetrate other networks that are actually clients of this particular ASP. So targeted attack, but not directly on the telecommunication. The purpose of this attack will be not to get information from the telecommunication companies, but to penetrate corporate clients of that ISP company.
Thanks very much, Timo, for that input. So thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar today. Again, if you'd like to ask a few more questions, we'll stick on the line and address the questions as they come in. But if you'd like to jump off, thanks so much for joining today. You can write us here if you'd like to receive a copy of the webinar. one more question has come in, and the question is, how do you see the development of AI, or artificial intelligence and machine learning, and what is its impact on cybercrime in the future?
Well, it's actually a very, very good question. One of the reasons why, because everyone thinks that artificial intelligence and machine learning will save the world, because all defensive measures will be much more effective. But on the other side, threat actors also using machine learning to improve their attacking tools. And where we can see right now, we develop their tools, so we really improve brute forcing techniques. This is step number one. Step number two, we improve their abilities to find new vulnerabilities in the code. We do it automatically, and machine learning can analyze a huge amount of data, find similarities in code, help them to improve this process much more. Let's imagine when you have a vendor that's patch one specific vulnerability. So when you have a patch, you understand what was the vulnerability, what was the error code, and you understand that potentially the same code was used in other products. And if it was true, you potentially can launch a machine learning algorithm to analyze many other source codes, not source code, but closed code, to find the same vulnerability in other products that you potentially could use the same code. And this helps so much when to find these vulnerabilities more and more effectively. And if you can take a look on Black Hat, DEFCON, there are some companies that using machine learning and artificial intelligence in finding these vulnerabilities. And I would say number of exploits, not exploits, number of vulnerabilities detected using machine learning against numbers of vulnerabilities found manually now comparable, and sometimes machine learning helps them to increase efficiency dramatically. So I would say first two lines where threat actors will develop by attacking tools, it will be improving brute forcing techniques, and the next one is developing, looking for new vulnerabilities using the same algorithms that you think not threat actors, defensive company could use to protect them.
Certainly something to help the defensive posture, but also to be used or already being used by cybercriminal community today. So thank you for that question, and thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. Really appreciate the time.